the overflow of the water in the leaky bucket is nothing but it is almost a bursty traffic, and this mechanism is for traffic fixed rate traffic by averaging the data rate. The water inflow to this bucket is varying in speed, or it may flowing into the bucket at different rate or different speed. The token represent a unit of data. All the tokens are grouped into packet. Dear students, welcome to computer science classes. I am Ravi Kumar KR, lecturer in computer science, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. Students, let us start our discussion with the unit, that is Unit 2, Data Link Layer. So, in this session, we are going to discuss about the topics leaky bucket algorithm, token bucket algorithm, and hierarchical clustering algorithm. These are the topics to be discussed in this session. So, let us start with the leaky bucket algorithm. So, look at the diagram here. So, this is a diagram for leaky bucket algorithm. As the name itself says, leaky bucket, assume that say this is a bucket and there is a water and it is leaking here. So if there is a small hole here, so the water leaking from this point, and this is where the water flowing into the bucket, and this is the concept of leaky bucket algorithm. Same thing we are incorporating in the algorithm. So what is here, if you look at this diagram here, so in this one, the host computer, this unregulated packet flow, and this is the bucket holding the data packets, and this interface contains the leaky bucket, and these are the regulated packet flow, and this is a computer network. So this is the concept of a leaky bucket algorithm. Now let us discuss this in detail. Now let us see what is the definition of leaky bucket algorithm. So it is a traffic shaping mechanism that controls amount and the rate of traffic sent to the network. So what is leaky bucket algorithm? It is a mechanism so that it's going to control the amount and the rate of the traffic sent to the network. So it is going to regulate the data traffic in a computer network. It shapes a bursty traffic into fixed rate traffic by averaging the data rate. So algorithm shapes the bursty traffic into, bursty means over traffic or over data flow into the network. So in the example, look at the diagram here. So this is if the water is flowing in continuously, so there is a limit for this bucket, and at a particular stage, so the water is flowing out. So it is nothing but a wastage of water. So similarly, that is the meaning of here bursty traffic. I mean, the overflow of the water in the leaky bucket is nothing but it is almost a bursty traffic, and this mechanism is for traffic fixed rate traffic by averaging the data rate. That is the use of leaky bucket algorithm. Now imagine a bucket with a small hole at the bottom. So this is a diagram here. So here if you look at the diagram here, assume that a small hole in the bucket here. Imagine a bucket, a small hole at the bottom. The rate at which the water is poured into the bucket is not fixed and can vary, but it leaks from the bucket at constant rate. So this is an important statement here. So in a leaky bucket, so in a hole in the bucket, so here the water is poured into. So if you look at the diagram here, see the water inflow to this bucket is varying in speed, or it may flowing into the bucket at different rate or different speed. But if you look at the diagram here, so here the size of the hole is constant here, and the water drops flowing at a constant rate from the out of this bucket through the hole. So this is the concept of leaky bucket here. So this is a bucket with a small hole here. So a constantly water is flowing out of the bucket through the hole. This is at a constant speed or a constant rate. But incoming to this bucket is not fixed. So this is incoming to this bucket, the water it may flow in different speed. So that is the meaning of the sentence here. So here the leaks from the bucket constant, but the flowing into the bucket is not fixed. Thus, as long as the water is present in the bucket, the rate at which the water leaks does not depend on the rate at which the water is input to the bucket. So here, if you observe this point here, as long as the water is present in the bucket, so this leakage, the water is leaking out of the bucket with the hole is a leaky bucket as long as there is a water in the bucket. So if there are no waters here, so there is no question of water coming out of the or flowing out of this bucket here. So here this constant speed, the water flowing out of the bucket through this leaky bucket is constant, and it does not depend on the inflow of water into this bucket. So I repeat here, the water leaking out from this leaky bucket is a constant, and this does not depend on the inflow of water into the leaky bucket. So this is it, doesn't depend on the rate at which the water is input to the bucket. So this is a leaky bucket algorithm. Now in the next slide, when the bucket is full, an additional water that enters into the bucket spills over the sides and is lost. Obviously, if you look at this bucket here, it has a capacity. So any incoming water of this is going to fill as long as this capacity of this bucket here. Once if it reaches the capacity, any water flowing in, it will spill out of the bucket and is going to be wasted here. So that is additional, the extra waters flowing out or flowing in continuously, that is we referred as a bursty traffic or bursty packet. So it spills over the sides and is lost. The same concept can be applied packets in the network. So whatever you have explained now, that is a leaky bucket algorithm. Same concept will be we are applying to the data packets flow in a computer network. So the leaky bucket algorithm allows only an average or constant rate of data flow. Its major problem is that it cannot deal with bursty data. So here, same thing, we can apply this to the computer network. So this is the computer network. Now look at this diagram here. Same diagram we are converting into the computer network. So here this is a computer network, and again, see the host computer. This is a host computer, and it is going to send the packet to the network. So this is unregulated packet flow. As we have seen in this example here, the data at which the water flowing into the bucket is vary or not in the same speed or not constant. Similarly, so without it, this is the data sent from the host to the network is unconditional or unregulated data packet flow here. See, this example is a packet flow in the network, and here this is the interface. We say it is an interface or a bucket here. It contains the data packets here, which are received from the host computer. So here we find number of packets from the network, and again, as we have seen, the data flow from the bucket, from the interface is constant here. So it is regulated or constant flow. Data packets moving in the network from this interface is constant. It is nothing but a regulated data flow, as we have seen in the diagram. So here water drops flowing at a constant rate from the leaky bucket. So same thing is applicable here with respect to the data packets in a computer network. So this is a diagram. It indicates it shows how the leaky bucket algorithm works. Now again, what is the drawback of this here? The algorithm allows only an average rate of data flow, and major problem is cannot deal with the bursty data. So as we have seen in the diagram here, so here there is a constant data flow in a network, as we have seen in this example. So irrespective of data coming into the network from different hosts or from the sender. So this is the one drawback of this And whatever the data it is, as we have seen in this example, the any water spilled out of the bucket. So here any data packets which is coming into the network beyond the capacity, all the data packets, we say it is a bursty traffic. This algorithm does not deal with that. Is not going to handle those bursty traffic in this example here in the computer network. So this is leaky bucket algorithm. Next we will see what is token bucket algorithm. So in the previous slide we have discussed about leaky bucket algorithm. Next one is token bucket algorithm. So what is it? A token bucket algorithm is a modification of leaky bucket in which leaky bucket contains token. So this is token bucket algorithm is a modification of leaky bucket algorithm. So here the leaky bucket contains the tokens. It is going to replace the number of data packets at what we have seen in the previous example. So the bucket contains the number of tokens. The token represent a unit of data. All the tokens are grouped into packets. So what are tokens? Tokens are nothing but it is a unit of data, and all the tokens are grouped into packets. And at a regular interval, tokens are thrown into the bucket and it accepts the token to its capacity. Once it reaches the capacity, it stops accepting the tokens. So as we have seen in the previous example, in the leaky bucket algorithm, here the tokens are thrown into the bucket at a regular interval of time. So if you look at the previous diagram here if you look into that, in this we have not talked about the bursty packets or the data packets flowing in beyond the capacity of the network. In this diagram, so here the tokens are thrown into the bucket at regular interval of time. So if you look at this leaky bucket algorithm here it is uncontrolled flowing in of water into the bucket. So there is no definite speed and there is no constant speed, and all the water flowing into the bucket. But in the same thing here, all the packets is flowing into the network. But in this example, in the token bucket algorithm, the tokens are thrown into the bucket and that it accepts the capacity to its capacity. And here the tokens are thrown into the bucket and the bucket accepts the data to its capacity. Once it reaches the capacity, is going to reject the data or is not accepting the tokens here. But in the previous example, if you observe this, so even though the water is flowing into the water bucket here, but here the extra water is spilling out once this bucket reaches capacity. So but here in this example, here once the capacity, the tokens are reach the capacity of the bucket, is not going to accept any further tokens. Now then the tokens are released or removed, then packets are sent to the network. So here once the tokens are filled into the capacity of the bucket, then it starts remove the tokens so that the packets are sent to the network. Now in this algorithm, tokens are generated at every clock tick. For a packet to be transmitted, system must remove the tokens from the bucket. So the concept here is, once the tokens are filled into the bucket, it starts releasing the tokens from the bucket, then the data packets move into the network. Similarly, this is going to generate the tokens at every clock tick, means at a regular interval of time. So as we have seen in the previous leaky bucket algorithm, there is no regulated data flow into the bucket, but here is a regulated control, so that at a regular interval of time or the tokens are generated and thrown into the bucket. And for a packet to be transmitted, the packet, if the data packet will be transmitted in the network, the tokens which are filled in the buckets has to be removed. So it is also at a regular interval of time, the tokens are released from the bucket so that the packets are flowing into the network. That is the concept in token bucket algorithm. So the token bucket algorithm allows idle host to accumulate credit for future in the form of tokens. Now look at the diagram here. See, this is the diagram for token bucket algorithm. So here a leaky bucket here, but as we have seen, the data at which the tokens are getting into this is regulated. Is regulated means at a constant time or a constant at a clock tick, is in the sense at a regular interval of time, these are called tokens are throwing into the buckets here. And how long the data is going to accept here? See, as long as suppose this is the size, the bucket size here. So this bucket accept the tokens to its capacity. Once its capacity is reached here, it will not accept the token into the bucket here. Now, when all these buckets is filled with number of tokens here, so then the packets has to travel to the network. So for that, once the tokens are in the bucket, this token has to be released from the bucket. Then the packets are moving to the network, or the packets moving into the network, across the network, once the tokens are released from this bucket here. So it's going to check this. So this is the flow chart here. See, these the packets are coming into this, and it checks for here enough tokens are there. So if there are no tokens, in the sense if the buckets are, if the bucket is empty, if means there are no enough tokens here, then this bucket, it cannot release any tokens. So data packets cannot move forward in the network. So if the data packet is to be moved in the forward, so token has to be released from the bucket. So at a regular interval of time, these tokens are released from this bucket, so that it checks for the condition here. If there are enough tokens, it will be released so that the data packets move forward across the network. Suppose if there are no enough tokens here in the bucket, it is the data packets are dropped here and the data packets are not moving in the network. So this is the concept of token bucket algorithm. In the next slide, we will see another type of algorithm, that is hierarchical clustering algorithm. So what is the definition of this? So it produces hierarchy of nested cluster. Now you know what is a cluster. Cluster is nothing but a group of devices. Now here a group of similar objects or devices into a cluster. So what is a cluster here? So a group of similar objects or multiple devices grouped together to form one cluster. And here the routers are divided into regions, nothing but cluster here. So if you look, what is the meaning of here? We have looked at the objects are nothing but devices. In the example, routers. If there are multiple routers in a network, so the similar routers are depending on the regions, it is divided into number of clusters. So in a region, means a cluster, one gateway router is identified. So if you talk about the cluster, it is nothing but a group of similar objects or similar routers in this example. In a cluster, one of them will be recognized as a gateway router, and data packets are routing within its region, means within the cluster. So the data packets are routing within its region, means within a cluster. So any packet outside this region has to go through gateway router. So this is gateway router is identified in a cluster. One of the router will be identified as a gateway router. Through that, the data has to move across the network. It is beyond, is moving out of the cluster. Each router has information of neighboring routers. So each router will be having information of neighboring routers, and it is a procedure of arranging routers in hierarchical order and example for corporate intranet. So here, what is the meaning of clustering or hierarchical clustering here? So all the routers are arranging in such a way that it forms in a hierarchical order. So example for this is in corporate companies, the intranet is an example for hierarchical clustering algorithm. Now look at this diagram here. Suppose this is a network, and here these are all multiple routers in a network. So here multiple routers in a network, and here say this is this forms one cluster. So this is one cluster. There are 4 routers here. In this example, there are 4 routers form one cluster. In this example, there are 3 routers. It is another cluster, and this is cluster number 3. You can assume that 1, 2, 3 are different clusters. And what is a cluster? Definition is a group of similar objects, or it is a region. We can assume that it is a region. So here data is going to transmit within the region or within the same cluster. Suppose in this cluster here, one of the router is identified as the gateway router. For example, you can assume that these are the gateway routers. So any traffic or data packet, it has to go to outside the cluster, and it has to go through the gateway cluster of their individual cluster. So this forms a hierarchical architecture or hierarchical algorithm. So this is hierarchical clustering algorithm. Students, so far we have discussed about a leaky bucket algorithm and token bucket algorithm and hierarchical algorithm. Now let us continue our discussion in my next session. Thank you very much.